Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha D. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, what are we doing here today?
Oh, one of those talks, we just want to get into it. Even though amongst us we have maybe like 81 years of gaming experience and all that, you never know enough. You can always learn something new, you can always improve. And that's what we do. We strive to get better. And so let's talk about what we feel we can do better as GMs. And hopefully it'll spark something or give somebody some insight into what they can do better as GMs.
A
So,
great
Anthony,
point, Dean. I guess for the purpose of this video discussion, we'll we'll talk about what we feel we can improve as a GMs, and with the hope by having a discussion of this topic of our own deficiencies in GM, and perhaps some of our listeners, are experiencing the same issues we do, and we could help each other grow somehow and improving not only our personal GMing capabilities, but improve the hobby as a whole. And we'll try to use the cipher system, some self-reflection, and hopefully advice from our audience to achieve those goals for running better games. So I guess we'll start off with Al. So Al, what area of GMing do you think you could improve upon?
Alright, so, there's a lot of things, we can work on. But for the video, we chose two areas we each would like to improve upon. For me, my first area is something I've struggled with, especially if you've watched our videos before. It's mentioned time and time again. But I would like to improve the runtime of my games. And runtime is an important factor for a lot of reasons. But let's just go right into it. What can we do to improve the pacing of your game?
I mean, the first thing I was gonna ask is, yeah, do you want to improve your pacing or your runtime? Because those two factors might be different things.
And for me specifically, it's runtime. I've been told my pacing is pretty good, but they kind of go hand in hand, which is why we mention both. But yeah, for me, runtime, especially is hard to maintain. Not that it's a bad thing in most cases, because most people don't mind, playing a little, maybe an extra hour, 30 minutes, or whatever have you. But when you're in a convention setting or whatever have you, or in a very limited time constraint setting, it's important to keep that runtime, strict, which is something I'm trying terribly hard to work on these days. And yeah.
I was gonna say I think a lot of GMs have issues. I'm not necessarily sure if they have issues with like a runtime, as in I'm gonna do 4 hours and I'm gonna give you a complete story from beginning to end. But it's like what you said. I think pacing is important when dealing with runtime. It's knowing how long specific scenes, how long you have as a GM, and knowing when to cut off a scene when it isn't doing well or it's just too damn long. You know,
and I'm gonna jump in on this one, in the sense of, like you said before, I don't think runtime is necessarily an issue when it comes to campaigns or anything like that, but it's especially when you're trying to get used to running for conventions, or you're going to run one shots on the server, and you set out a block of time, and some people are strict to that those time constraints. So something that I've done personally, and maybe it can help you, is I don't necessarily prep, all the scenes, but I'll have an outline sentence for however many scenes I think. And, you know, but I put a check mark or a special mark next to the ones that I really feel need to happen. And then have the others as filler, you know. And then that way you can kind of judge, and because it's cipher system, it's easy to manipulate those scenes into each other, and that's what I try to do. I try to write things that are going to go together, especially for a one shot. That's just me.
I
um,
oh
I was gonna say, me personally, pacing is something that I feel is one of my stronger suits when running games. It's something that I kind of take pride in. And what I do for every session, whether it's a 6 hour session or a 2 hour session, is I have my phone out with the time, to be honest. So I know if I'm playing a 2 hour session, my phone beeps 1 hour in. So it lets me know either I have to speed up a specific scene to move on to the next scene, or I have a little time to play with. If I look at, I said, hey, we did the introductory scene. We're already on our second scene. I still have 15 minutes, before I have to hit that midway point of the session. I'll let the players more interact with each other. I'll bring out an NPC to eat up some of that time, with dialogue. Personally, as someone who's played in your games, I think your problem isn't necessarily the actual story or the scenes. I think your problem is you have what you do is you allow the players to dictate the narrative a little too much. As in, if you introduce something that isn't relevant to the overall narrative, the overall story, and they want to gravitate towards it, even though it has nothing to do with the one shot, nothing to do with the story, you will allow them to waste 30 minutes shopping for grocery bags. you know what I mean? Instead of saying, hey guys, you brought it, let's move on.
I fully understand that. Actually, what I was going to say, before you started talking, was that something I'm working on towards this goal is figuring out which scenes to cut off sooner and which scenes to just be like, not cut off sooner, but like you said, kind of narrate it quickly. Like, hey, you stop at the store, you bought X, Y, and Z. There's no reason to have a full-on role-playing scene with the shopkeep negotiating prices or whatever have you. They can just say, hey, I stopped at the store, they bought this, moving on. I am quite guilty of indulging in those role-play moments, as Anthony has, shared with the world right now. Yeah, I definitely have tried to eliminate those sort of elements. Even though I still do try to encourage players to take any actions they so see fit, I should get better about what I allow in regards to the goals of the narrative.
Do it this way, Al. I would say to you, think of it in this way: relevancy. What's going to be relevant to that story? Is it adding value in those moments? Because sometimes those impromptu things do add some value, but you should be able to gauge that. You can gauge that within the first 2 to 5 minutes of something opening up. And that's what I was saying about having your scenes with the little check marks and stuff. So and that will also, like with Anthony's idea of a phone and a timer,
which is
and then you have
excellent,
a check mark, and then you have a check mark next to the things that need to happen in order for it to for the story to progress. And that, just a little bit of advice. Those are the type of things that I do to make sure my story stays on pace and stays focused to the story, and then
I'm sorry, dude.
No, that's really about it. Go ahead.
I was going to say I wasn't trying to discourage interaction between players and NPCs, like dialogue. What I'm saying is when that dialogue gets stale, is recognizing that the dialogue is getting stale, or
Yes.
or like what Dean said, it isn't adding any value. Like, okay, they had their fun, they had their laughs, the jokes were said. It's recognizing, okay, this conversation is getting stale. Let me cut it off and move on. Not cut off the improv and the dialogue with one another, but cutting it off, when it starts getting irrelevant to the story. Like, now it has nothing to do. Now we're just wasting time, just BSing.
And
we could be moving on to a next scene.
I will say again, I am quite guilty of letting that drag on because I personally enjoy it. But yes, it is definitely something that I can improve upon when it comes to the runtime of my games, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Also, what Dean said about writing down, the important scenes, it's, that's actually the best advice for pacing. Like when you structure a 4-hour one shot, it's easier to discuss this with one shots because you have a set amount of time, and you write down 5 or 6 scenes that you possibly want, right, in this adventure, right? But you should also break it down even further to 3 or 4 scenes that have to hit. And I like to break it down even further than that. I break it down in a beginning, midway point, and finale, right?
Mhm.
So if I know that I'm nowhere near my midway point in a 4 hour session, but yet I've already added 2 hours into the adventure, I know I have to speed it up to get to that midway point, or I'm going to lose time for the finale, which is, you want to hit the finale with enough time to allow the players to do whatever they want. You know, you want to hit the final scene with at least an hour of playing time left. So to give them time to do whatever the hell they want.
And oh,
Go ahead. No,
I
go
was just
ahead.
gonna say one other thing though. Yes, to give yourself time for the finale, and then don't be guilty of something that I have made a mistake a couple of times. Giving yourself enough time for the finale, getting to the finale, and then your players doing something like Anthony did and roll 5 freaking 20s,
Oh,
and your
that's happened to
finale.
me. That's happened to me a ton of
That's what
times
I'm
too.
saying. And your finale is over before it really begins. So, you know what? Try to prep an epilogue. You know, just something to throw in.
just as an
That I've
aside,
been guilty of that too, Dean.
what you call it? That actually happened in the last game I ran for the server, which was that Cyberpunk game. And the players, they destroyed the big, like, it was a fight, kind of. They basically had him blinded the whole fight and convinced him like his minions were slashing each other while they were blinded. So there was no actual fighting, just a lot of convincing and silliness while being blind. But it ended a lot more quickly than I expected. So I did exactly what Dean said. There was a sort of epilogue afterwards. I explained the whole situation at hand, what happened afterwards, due to their altercation being extended, and and yeah, it's super important if their scene is ending more quickly than anticipated to have that little fallback, because players might end the scene in ways you might not expect.
Exactly. So,
Al, you had mentioned something earlier off camera that made a ton of sense as well when we were discussing this about, taking the cues from the players, see what scenes they want to extend and see what scenes aren't working. Just because something is cool in your head and it was cool when you wrote it down doesn't mean that other people think it's cool. And when I was beginning GM, I used to fall victim of that way too often. I would create a villain or NPC that I thought was hella cool, and it was just annoying to every one of the players. Like, why is this guy talking to us for 15 minutes? Recognizing what the players want and what the players are enjoying, and enhance those scenes and use your extra time for those scenes and cut short the ones that are not.
Yep, it's
that's
one.
that.
Oh,
No, I was just saying that's that whole thing I said earlier: relevancy
Mm-hmm.
and value. You know, I try to. What I've been doing lately is trying to boil my GMing and things down to key words that are trigger words, and I'll have them written down. I keep those words and stuff written around just so I can look at them. It's on a post-it note right over here. I got relevancy, and value, for the simple fact I want to continue to improve in that department, because, like Anthony said, we're guilty. We're creatives. We want to tell a story. We have an idea. We have a structure. Or whatever we're trying to do. And sometimes you don't want to be the guy that becomes railroady either. We're, like we said, we like for it to go off the track sometimes. So
I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're not a capable GM if you're not making these mistakes. Because the only way you can recognize their mistakes is by actually doing them. And,
yeah,
so everything that's, even though we each pick individual mistakes that we feel that we make often, I think it's fair to say we've all made all these mistakes on this list that we're going to go over in the video.
absolutely, absolutely.
100%.
It's just, I think we're looking at it from the perspective of the things that we're doing the most, or the things that we're doing now that we look at. I mean, because I've looked at with all of this, self-evaluation, and going over different games and stuff like that. So yeah, I know.
So I guess the next question I'll ask in regards to this, Al, is why is pacing important in a game session?
Well, the biggest reason is that that people's time is valuable. They come to a game expecting to spend 4 or 5 hours, whatever the preset, said your runtime is going to be. And if your game is not done by the end, they might, not done by the 4 or 5 hours that whatever time slot you set, they might have to leave sooner than the game is done, and that might leave them feeling a little unsatisfied or, a little ripped off, so to speak. They were promised a full game in 4 hours, but they're having to leave before it ends because the GM is mishandling his time. And, that's unfortunate. And I don't think with me anyway, I haven't encountered anyone who has gotten particularly upset over that situation, but I can see it being an issue for some.
It's not even necessarily being upset. It's just a sense of not being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, just imagine, watching, The Empire Strikes Back and never getting a resolution to, I'm your father. You just be like, well, what happened? I want to know what would have happened. So I get it. And I think that's like the best thing.
I mean, I can totally understand where Al's coming from, because I've been in those situations before where I either signed up for a 4-hour session and it's 6 hours in, and I'm like, okay, this is too long for me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's too long, or especially at a con. I got another game to get to, another event to get to,
and you could still have had fun in the session and still feel unfulfilled. Like, those two don't have to be, like, they don't have to go hand in hand for them to both be a reality. You could have expected a 4-hour session, had fun in the 6-hour session, but still feel like, hey, 6 hours is way too long. Yep. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
100%.
And I do think that most people, from experience, when I've run bad sessions, most people aren't going to tell you that they didn't have a good time, unless it's a true friend that's going to be honest with you. Especially random people that you either meet online or meet at cons. They'll never tell you, hey, this was horrible. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, they'll be like, oh yeah, I had a great time, and then when they leave, oh man, that guy was crazy.
Never playing with him again.
That's why it's important to get feedback from people like Anthony mentioned, like your true friends or your not just feedback, but I mean critiques. You can also ask strangers for this, but they won't as willingly give it up usually because they're afraid of hurting your feelings or something like that.
So Anthony, what do you think you need to improve, my friend?
Oh, mine is this has been my problem for many, many, many years. I really, really want to be better organized during my game sessions. And I think, I'm going to go back into my psychoanalysis. The 12-year-old me would organize everything, right? I would prep for a week for a 4-hour session. I would have notebook upon notebook of adventures, NPCs, locations. I will have the name of the big bad's great-great-grandmother in case someone asked. I would have everything. And then as I got older, I went to the opposite side of the spectrum, which these guys know is I want a game on a cocktail napkin. I want that happy medium, which I've gone further and further away from prep, which leads me to, I'm a pretty decent improv GM. I don't get, razzled or scared to come up with stuff on the fly, but I do think that I should have a little more organization in my actual game settings, aside from getting images and the occasional name.
So I would give this piece of advice to you. Why don't you try one of the framework ideas, like the 731 idea, to start? Because you know about 731, right?
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, 731 is the concept. I can't remember the gentleman's name who came up with it, but it's very similar to what I've been doing for years. And I just happened to read it. I was like, wow, somebody thinks like I do. But 731 is basically you pick 7 locations, 3 encounters, and 1 big bad. And you build those things out, you prep those things, and then you improvise through your session with those locations, those encounters, and the big bad. And I think if you start with those type of ideologies, those simplistic frameworks, especially for doing one shots, it helps with the organization. you know and that's what I say. I call them frameworks. That's really basically my method, especially for a one shot, because I don't want to over prep. I don't want to be disappointed that I prepped all this cool stuff and the players never get to it. So I do my best to try to find that word again, that those things that are going to be relevant to my story, and have that. So these are my favorite notebooks to use.
Dean,
You can barely see
for,
them.
for the record, 731. It was written by Jason Cordova, so we could give him his.
Thank you. Jason Cordova wrote the 731 article.
Yep.
And it's not long, people. You can find it right online. It's easy. It's an easy find. We can even put a link to it, right?
Yep. I just Googled it right now as you were speaking.
And we'll put the link at the bottom for you. So anybody who might be interested in that to use it is an excellent article, excellent advice.
Like my problem is not necessarily like because I kind of do something similar to that. I write sentences for scene structures. My problem is when the game is going on. You know what I mean? Like players, we improvise names and locations, and I don't write them down in a cohesive area where I'm gonna be able to get it later. You know what I mean? So after the session, I'll be like, oh man, they named a cool place. What was that place again? I scribbled like 3 letters, and now I'm trying to figure out what it was. You know what I mean? Like being better organized. Not scene structure, just being better organized during the game session.
I think I can chime in here because this is something I think it's one of my stronger suits, even though, again, I don't make too many notes or anything like that. But what's helped me a ton, and you can do this digitally too, but I prefer physical. Most of my notes are physical. Occasionally I'll do like a pre-work on a digital format, like a Google Doc or something, but all my notes during the game are physical in a notebook. Because for me, it's easier to flip through a little book instead of like trying to find out which tab between all the tabs you have open or whatever have you.
Exactly.
But for me, something that's helped a ton is when you're writing down the notes for your game or whatever have you, when you're detailing each section, like let's say you're going to your second scene or whatever have you, you start a brand new blank section of your notebook or wherever you happen to have the notes for that game going on. And you mark
napkin?
Yeah, you unfold part of the napkin, you get to an unwritten part of it. And you write down, hey, you title your scene, whatever's happening, you just name it by a major plot point, however you do it. And then you just label, give little sections for locations named during this scene, NPCs named during this scene. And if you already have those things planned, they should already be in that part of the notebook, if that makes sense. So if you have...
I'm sorry, Ab. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that that way, when you're coming to that scene, you flip to that page, in your little notebook, however you want to bookmark it. I use little, sticky note type tabs that kind of stick out from the notebook. So you write little, however you want to label it, but that's how I label it, whatever. So I flip to that page, and you get to there. The relevant information is already there for you, whether it be an important NPC or an important location or whatever have you. And you also have a blank area for the players and yourself for the improvised information that comes up, whether it be a plot detail or an NPC or whatever. You'll have a blank area to keep it all in one place. And when you try to come back to it later after the sessions, then you just say, hey, I need to go to my tab that says scene 2. Bing, bang, boom. There it is.
I was just going to say that Al makes an excellent point, Anthony. And I was showing that was just a little stenographer's notebook. You know, get you a stenographer's notebook. And since you said you plan out your scenes anyway, you have them written out. Write every scene on one sheet of paper, every page. And then that way you can just go from page to page. And if you write your notes right there, you know, it's a win-win-win.
Yeah,
you know,
so
that's
so
how
basically, I got to stop being a lazy ass.
Well, yes.
Well, you get a notebook too. And get a notebook.
The thing is,
stop being a lazy ass. I get a notebook. Oh man.
The important aspect here is you'll still be doing basically the same amount of prep work you already do. The extended work here, quote unquote, is separating it and detailing where it's actually separated. So what I like to personally do is it's taken from the bullet journaling method, where at the beginning of your notebook you set a table of contents, and then you actually number your notebook, like you actually write where your page 1 starts and whatever have you. And in your table of contents you can write, hey, you know, one shot Cyberpunk one shot scene 2 is on page 12, and then you skip to that page.
You know what made me really notice this is because, you know, I do extensive prep on Roll20, but it's more images and atmospheric elements to the role-playing game as opposed to, and I noticed on the Keep of the Borderlands, you know, now that I'm running a continuous bi-weekly game, is that the players are giving me the story. They're building the narrative for me, but I don't remember the names. And then I literally have to go back just to see what people typed on Roll20 chat log when I go to try to prep for the next session. And I should just stop being lazy and write it down while it's happening in active time.
So,
you know, I'm like creating more work for myself by being lazy in the beginning.
So my caveat or my takeaway for this, Anthony, would be get a notebook. And every session, start a page. You know what? We're going into our 4th session, so you'd be like session 4. ... This is what they gave us. You know, so when you get ready to do, if we end up having to do a 5 and a 6, boom, looking for. Oh yeah, that's, you know, and you can go all the way back, because just like you have us do a recap every week.
But that's because it's sheer laziness, because I don't have the notes from the week before.
Something that might help you, Anthony, though, and this is something I'm sure you've done with other things in your games, because I've seen you do it, I've seen you start them, not maintain them. The issue here would be maintaining a handout on the Roll20 that, you know, is just you know, major NPC list or major location list or whatever.
Story of my life, bro.
But it involves maintaining it. Another thing though, just to throw it out there as a tip/trick for something in this realm, is if you are doing physical notes, right? Something you can do if you find yourself flipping back and forth between your notebook a lot, but the players are interacting with, let's say, an important NPC or, you know, important information that's not changing, is to put that information on a sticky note. That way you can take the sticky note off with the NPC information and move to whatever scene it needs to be on and put it on there. That way you're not flipping back and forth looking for this information.
You know what's funny? Just hearing, you know, because everything you guys saying makes sense in theory. Like, it's 100% right. But I think, like, my problem is, and it's more of a you know, self-reflection. It's the same way I hate having to look up a rule, you know, mid-game. I'd rather just move the story forward with you know, make a call, a ruling call to keep the narrative flowing. I think mentally, I hate having to stop my thought process of the narrative to write down something that was just said. And I have to break that habit. You know what I mean?
And you know what? Another thing you might want to use then too, Anthony, to just kind of help you is a dry erase mat. And then you can organize it later. But you can put the stuff down while it's happening, you know, and then at the end of the session you go, okay, I got all of this, but it's still fresh because you just did it, and then that way you don't necessarily have to break your immersion, you
Yeah.
know, to and looking through the notes or whatever. But you can use a dry erase to do that, and then you can even have that dry erase set up too, for when you sit down at the table. Okay, look here, I got my previous week's notes. Da, 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 you know, and then you can set stuff up. I mean, it's a lot of little tricks, and I understand not wanting to break the immersion. You know, but the other side of the coin is, let's look at it this way: unless we're running uh, an actual play that we're gonna heavily edit and
Yeah.
disregard, it's okay because you're really not breaking the immersion because we're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
We're just there with you.
Yeah, it's just like a mental block that I have to break myself. And it's funny because I was the exact opposite of the spectrum early in my GMing days. And then I went, way, way to the other side of the room,
I mean,
and
dude, I understand it
it's
because,
finding that happy medium.
and that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to find a happy medium in my time these days. Trying to become a better GM is refining all those things. And like when we get to my
Yeah.
question,
I
you're
mean,
gonna see.
the last one, so we'll move it off before we get to your question is, I guess I'll ask, what are the pitfalls from not having an organized game? How does that affect the players?
Well, firstly, obviously, and most obviously, it slows down your pacing or your If you're talking about between sessions, you might lose important information. You end up having to ask the players for it, and it might end up ruining like some in a meta way the immersion because now you're asking them for information, so they might think, hey, this thing is going to be important later. Again, it kind of ruins that meta immersion in a campaign type situation. But as far as what my expertise goes within a one shot situation or just within, the session of the campaign, it can lead to slowing things down even if you don't intend it to. Like for instance, in most cases the players will remember the name or something, but in case they forget or they forget to write it down, let's say in the stories, this NPC that was just improvised, they named it whatever. 5 minutes later, they're talking to it or asking him his name. Now you're fumbling. Like, oh shit, what did I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
Like, what was his name again? Like, and it takes 10 seconds to just like get into the habit. Oh, excuse me. It's important to get into the habit to take the 10 seconds to get prepared when an improvised piece of information is gonna come up, whether it be by opening that Word doc or getting your notebook and pen ready and say, hey, what was his name? Jot it down real quick. Then later on, you can organize it however you wish, but it's the important part is having it exactly what it is written down in the moment.
And another pitfall that I can honestly tell you, I've seen it happen 1,000 times. Um, Lack of organization leads to lack of fun. Now there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're trying to tell your story, but you're not organized. You don't have all your ducks in a row. Players are going to not be able to get the immersion that they need. They're not going to be able to get their rhythm and how the game is flowing. If this is supposed to be an ongoing campaign, you're going to lose players. You know, and that's really that's huge. You know, and I think what Al was saying is like the best piece of advice because it would really make sense if you use those interaction points just for that. You know what? Real cool thing. You've been doing it. I don't even think you realize you do it. But you set us up. You'll introduce an NPC, and then you'll set us up where we have to kind of role play amongst ourselves, and then come back to the NPC. That's your time to be taking your notes. Yeah, you listen to us with like half an ear, and then get those notes together. We're giving you that 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or whatever it is, because we're going to banter back and forth because you set us up to. And it's an encouraged thing. Al does it. We all try to do that, encourage our players to interact like it's a real story.
So that leads us to you, Dean. What is area you want to improve upon?
patience with my players. You know, I I just sometimes become impatient because I forget that everybody hasn't been playing for over 40 years like myself. You know, and sometimes I expect too much. Is really what I believe I do. It's like, well, did you know that? Or, but, and I have to kind of rein it in a little bit and, try to get everyone to, not even try to get everyone to get myself to go, wait a minute. This guy may have only been playing for the last month. This might be his first session, you know, and it's like when somebody knows the jargon or knows role playing information and stuff. And even that, I have to be patient because it's like, wait a minute, they're coming from Dungeons and Dragons, they're coming from Pathfinder, they haven't played Cypher, they haven't played a narrative game. So they're really thinking in a different vein.
I guess I'll ask, when you mean when you mean patience, right? Do you think it's subconsciously you're playing their characters for them almost in a sense? Like, as the GM, you create scenarios, right? Because that's what we do. We create scenes, we create conflict, and then the players have to solve them whichever way they see, deem fit. Right? Do you think subconsciously you have solutions in your head, and then you're
Oh
not
yeah,
patient? You're not patient when they don't see the solution that you had, thought up yourself.
absolutely. That's I'm very guilty of that. That's like the nail on the head because I will literally, he's playing an adept, he's playing a glaive, he's playing a warrior, he's playing a speaker, and I put him in a situation, and I'm like, okay, so this particular situation is really a spot where the speaker can shine, and I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna let him do his thing, and the glaive, so, the warrior just smashes somebody at the top of the head, and it's like,
Yeah, I could definitely see that because there's a fine line of providing your players resources and leading them straight to the water and forcing them to drink it. You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
So and even sometimes the way that you would perceive something is not how everyone else, because we all think differently. We
right.
all different. So I would think one of the things that I would do is to take a step back, and when you start getting a little antsy or start wondering why the players aren't following the cues that you're giving for, just take a step back and ask them a simple question.
Yeah.
What are you trying to get out of this? Whether it's an investigation scene, it's a combat scene. What are you trying to accomplish? And then let them talk for a minute.
Good advice.
And I was gonna say, yeah, that's actually, I have the opposite problem, as you guys know, as mentioned above. I have a little too much patience when it comes to letting the players, decide and talk and do whatever. But in this regards, it's actually an excellent exercise in practicing that patience because you take that step back and the players again. You might have an idea on how you want a problem to be solved, and you might even have it set in your notes like the players must solve it this way, even though that's kind of a bad thing to do. But if you take a step back, you can let their creative juices flow, and they might come up with something extremely unique, and something you probably didn't think of as a solution for the problem at hand. And all it takes to get that going is to just give them a moment, or give yourself a moment, and let them take the reins. I don't know if it's like again. I think Anthony mentioned it before with the wanting to control like each scene, and you mentioned it like I'm setting up this scene for the glaive. I'm setting up this scene, for the speaker, right? You keep the strength and whatever of the team in mind. Something I like to do that kind of helped releasing that sort of like kind of feeling to control the scene, if that makes sense, is instead of focusing on one of the characters as the focal point of a scene, or if I'm trying to share the spotlight or whatever have you, I'll set up a generically like a generic situation. Like, it won't be, hey, the speaker is the one who's gonna have to handle this. It'll be, hey, there's a social situation at hand, whether it be intimidation, coercion, whatever. It's up to the group to decide who's best at that. Setting up these generic situations, again, allows you to release some of that control and gives it more to the players and gives you time to practice that patience while they decide, hey, who from the group is going to take control here. Whereas it seems like from what you're talking about, you have that spotlight already kind of predetermined.
You know, and it's not so much that I have it predetermined. In my mind, it's always what makes the most sense in my mind. And that's what I have to let go of. Because every situation that I do put together, I do, of course, I mean, you've played in my games. I do try to make it completely, you know, multifaceted. But my thought process is, okay, this is the perfect opportunity for this particular character type to have a spotlight. And that's what I'm looking at. So where my lack of patience comes in, it's not so much that I don't care about a different solution. It's just like, why? You know what I mean? And that's what I got to let go of. I got to remember, like I said, everybody doesn't have over 40 years of gaming experience. Everybody doesn't think the way I do. Everybody doesn't see the picture in the way that I see it. So
I was just gonna say that, Dean. You're viewing it as in the lens of someone that's been gaming for 40 years, instead of having, you know, walking in their shoes per se.
right.
I think just hearing you talk, I think another bit of advice, which this wouldn't help you in the moment, but I think it might help you in the long run, is to play as a player in more games. Because when you play as a player in more games, you learn to be empathetic to the player agency of an individual character, as opposed to, you know, you've been GMing for 40 years, so you used to have, and this is I think a lot of people fall guilty of this, is, you know, when you used to controlling the entire world, like so often in multiple games, that you think for you're thinking for 50 NPCs, and it's so easy to think for the 50 NPCs plus the 4 players at the same time. you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'll say this to both of you. I take that advice. That is the best piece of advice you've given me. So that means the two of you have to run more games, or we have to get more games, because I just don't get to play as much as I would love to. Because it's always like, okay, I'll run.
I actually just churned out about 3 one-shot ideas between last night and this morning, so I definitely have stuff. But to keep on track, something... Oh, I lost my train of thought. Somebody take over. I completely lost my train of thought.
I mean, so I guess Alita... So how important or useful is player agency to a GM then? Because, you know, part of being impatient with the players is sort of like taking their agency away. When you know, if you're implying it should be done this way, it does directly affect player agency. So how could someone use player agency to be useful to a GM, you know, when you're GMing?
Well, I think I can answer that, and I think that's what's been helping me the most. That player agency, you know, it's kind of been forcing me to actually see that other side, see that perspective, and see the solutions they come up with. And what it's done is actually, I think it's made me better at those points that I do have to improv. So I have to take a note, like we were talking about you taking a note. You know, the player solves the social encounter way differently than I expected them to. You know, they didn't use the speaker; they used the warrior to intimidate the guy, like Al said. You know, that becomes a note for the next time I run. You know, this character is susceptible. You know, did I make this NPC? Oh, well, you know what? This NPC is now susceptible to intimidation. That was actually a good solution. It was better than the way I thought it would run. You know, so I do kind of take it in and learn from giving them agency, or the agency that they take, you know, because I do my best never to make anybody feel like, oh God, it's never that. I'll go, oh, okay, different. And keep the momentum. So that's one thing I can say about player agency being important.
And I actually remembered what I was going to say before, is that I'm kind of, again, because of how long I've been playing, what, 5, 6 years, it's kind of the opposite spectrum of you, Dean, where you, like Anthony had pointed out, where you're coming to the table as a GM of 40 years experience or whatever. I'm coming to the table even as the GM, as someone who's only GM maybe 3 years and has been mostly a player. So I see from the eyes of the players, like, hey, they want to be given the opportunity to do something like outside the box or whatever have you. I usually, personally, when I come up with scenes, I don't think of a solution. Like, I'll be straight up, I don't think of a solution. I just say, hey, here's the problem. This is the problem they're going to face. And it's up to them, well, however they want to approach it. Because, again, I don't choose who's going to get the spotlight. It's up to them to choose who gets the spotlight. Based on their strengths and how they want to approach that issue. I mean, occasionally I'll have in my notes they could solve it by doing X if they're if I feel like it's a complex enough thing that they might struggle to figure out something on their own. I'll have like a little simple solution. But if it's a simple problem, I don't even think of a solution. I just leave it blank. Just the players are going to come up with something.
You've just given me something, and you know what? It's actually, see, we talk about not bringing other biases or other, system thought processes into Cypher and trying to, become purely Cypher. What you just said just triggered the actual thought and the reason why it happens. That's a holdover. That's a holdover from other games that are more system heavy, because you had to think about what the solution was going to be. How could they solve this? Where Cypher system doesn't have those same limitations. So thanks, Al. Look at that.
It's definitely an excellent perspective to have. Again, I kind of saw it a little bit when I first started GMing, because my first game ever as a GM was 5e. I was trying to set those solutions and also create, again, I found out quickly that you can't railroad people into doing basically anything. I mean, with certain limitations, but either way, the scenarios I had set up, I was also setting up the solutions, thinking that, hey, if the players didn't approach us this way, they just weren't going to solve it, period. Like, they had to do it this way. And coming into Cypher, it was extremely liberating to not have to think of the solution anymore. It was just, hey, the players are going to come with it. Like, it was just so awesome to have that feeling.
And you know what? That leads me into, I guess, a final thought on this whole process. I'm going to be okay. For the simple fact, now what you've just done for me, you've given me the actual solution to all my solution issues. And you know what that is? The players will come up with the answer, and at that moment, I can determine if it's viable or not, no matter what the hell they do. You know what? That was a smart idea. I think that'll work. And that's kind of where I'm gonna approach it now, because I think it'll make everything better on my side, and I think I'll be able to give something more to the players too.
Most definitely.
So I guess that wraps up the solution to this problem. So Al, what is your next area that you think you need to work on further?
All right, so this is a fun one, and not necessarily something that everyone would want to work on. It's just something personal for me as a GM that I want to work on because I think it's fun. But I want to get better at doing voices for my NPCs. Not necessarily just speaking as them in the first person, which is also something I need to work on, but actually putting on a voice and keeping it for the NPC. Whether it be like a gruff sailor on the dock, or maybe a little kid out on the street, begging for candy. But I'm having difficulty, picking a voice and then sticking with it in character. And again,
I think a lot of people feel your pain on this. This is like, I do not have a problem staying in character. I have a problem since I have to have such a heavy New York accent. My range of voices is very minimal. You know what I mean? So, like, I definitely feel your pain on this one. That I would definitely want to have more voices in my repertoire, but I kind of try to make up for it by using other areas. Like, I'll highlight certain personality traits, mannerisms. I'll do, I'll do other ways to make the NPCs stand out if you can't do voices. Because I'm gonna say this first and foremost, we hear this all the time. You do not have to be a master impressionist to be a great GM, and anyone that's telling you otherwise is just straight bullshitting you. You do not need to do that.
And
I mean, it helps, but you do not. That isn't important in the grand scheme of things.
and I'm gonna add this to what Anthony's saying. Um, I kind of have a little gift. I can do certain impressions and stuff. I'm pretty good at it. But I think something that I think a lot of people struggle with and don't realize. You said something. You said you want to be better at doing NPC voices. The voice isn't always just what you hear. It's the mood they set. So if you can start mastering that aspect, it'll help you move into the whole voice because uh like when we were playing Anthony's what is it? Lucas sleeping with the fishes or whatever. Is that what it was? It wasn't that what
Yeah,
that was called?
yeah. The animal
Yeah, the
Godfather spinoff. Yeah.
right. And I picked up my Muggsy character.
Mm.
Hey, you know what I'm talking about? Because hey, I want to be there. Because this we can't be messing around with these mooks, you know. But it was more of what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the bruiser rat, the tough guy. He walked around with his little bat and but it was about because I could I give that impression. And I think when you start doing that, and you do a good job at it, Al, you do give a good job of not necessarily, doing always doing the voices, but you set up the image. And by setting that image, you start the voice. So even if you falter sometimes or don't keep it going, I still hear that same voice. You know.
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways you can improve
Oh yeah,
impressions if
absolutely.
you wanted to. I mean, one of the key ways is watch a lot television, pick or television or movies or what have you. Pick a specific character on a television show you like, and try to mimic the person. Whether it's a British accent or Australian accent, and keep on watching the same episode and try to repeat the dialogue, further mimicking the way their word inflections are, their breath, where they pause to breathe at. And if you did that consistently, you can improve on like any other thing in life. Repetitiveness, will improve you improve upon it.
What Anthony's saying, it might be something
Mm.
you want to do, especially if you're running a campaign or something. Pick one
Mm.
character and develop that idea of what that character is going to be. You know, I mean, and if you do that, you know, I mean, Anthony will probably recognize this character right away.
Mm.
You know, same thing we do every night. Try to take over the world. You know
I
that
don't recognize that. I
you
know
don't
the
recognize
phrase. I
Pinky
know
and the
the
Brain.
phrase. Oh,
Pinky
Pinky
and
the
the
Brain.
Brain.
Yeah,
I
I
know
was
the
like, what?
phrase.
You don't
Yeah.
recognize? But
You know, but you know what I'm saying now. I mean, if you try something like that, just if you were to sit there and you brought a character in and he had a catchphrase, he said it a specific way.
No, and then like we said too, you could also create originality and have make a NPC memorable by using other things, mannerisms, lisp, stutter, you know, describe an NPC that wears particular clothing over out either outlandish clothing, walks with a limp. There's a ton of things you could do other than
That cre-
mastering voices.
but no,
Yeah.
that creates a voice.
Mm.
and exactly what Dean is saying. Because again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Quite honestly, it's just again me personally. I'd like to do voices, so I want to try to incorporate it more. But no matter what your approach is, as long as you do it well, it will create the voice in the player's mind. Whether it be a streetwise, thug, or like, a very educated scholar, as long as you're presenting how they're speaking, like, they straighten up as they talk to you or whatever. Even if you're speaking about what their dialogue is in a third person, such as they are saying to you, blah, 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 it'll still create a voice in their head if you create that mental image.
There you go.
Yeah, I would tell a funny story. Um, when we did the Warriors game, I started out with one of the NPCs having a West Indian Jamaican accent, and by the time of the end of the adventure, he sounded Dominican.
But
I remember that.
yeah, it
That
is
was
something I have been trying. Is what Anthony said. Just earlier was when I watch stuff, I try to mimic the stuff I hear. But that has come with a pitfall though, which I've learned from doing it, and I'm not 100% sure really how to improve upon it other than to just practice. But what I've been having trouble with, when I'm listening to the thing and mimicking it, I feel like I do it dead on. Like, hey, I'm mimicking this perfectly. I sound just like the thing I'm talking like, but I have to be saying exactly what they're saying. Like, I can't improvise a line or something with the same voice. Like, I find myself faltering on how to exactly enunciate certain words or whatever when I'm coming up with it on my own. So, whereas, watching and mimicking the thing while it's happening, it's pretty easy to do. On the other side of the coin, coming up with your own lines and whatever in those voices has been pretty difficult for me. And again, I think that would just come with what Anthony says is practice, practice, practice. But yeah, it is something I definitely want to practice more, because just as a funny story about voices, at work I find myself tricking my coworkers with my voices, just pranking them. For instance, I had a coworker who was stocking a beverage, one of the freezers or whatever. He was putting drinks away. I walked up behind him. I was like, "Excuse me, Sonny, could I please just get?" Like, I was talking like I stuttered in my voice or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am." And he's just like trying to get out of the way. And that was super funny. Because he was like, he turned around, he's like, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am, excuse me." He like even got fully out of the way before he realized. I was like, "Oh, wait, ow." I've had a couple of different stories where I've tricked other coworkers with my voice, but so yeah, I think we've hit the nail on the head with the voice stuff. I really enjoy that stuff. Want to get better at it, so I plan to practice. But I think that leads us on to Anthony's next points of improvement. And Anthony, what will that be?
I guess mine goes back to my original area that I need work on as well, because I think they kind of go hand in hand. Since I do a lot of improv, I tend to, fall back on familiar narratives and tropes, and I want to avoid that. I think a lot of it has to do with that I do have 30 years of experience as a GM, so I have a big toolkit that I could pull from. And I know it's funny because in a lot of videos, we tell newer GMs to do exactly what I'm trying to avoid, is fall back on familiar, scenes that work. And since you're playing with players that hadn't experienced the scene beforehand, that it's a good idea to, rehash those tropes, to a newer audience. But with me, I think it's, I think if you're not constantly pushing the boundaries of where you want to go creatively, you might not necessarily be improving yourself as a GM. So a lot of times I would either rehash specific NPCs, mannerisms or types, or even scenes that I know have worked in prior games to a new audience. And yeah, it doesn't directly affect that audience because it is fresh and new to them, but it isn't fresh and new to me. So I feel like I'm not being creative enough. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it 100% makes sense. Because, excuse me, in essence, the GM is also a player, and if you're basically playing the same game, quote unquote, even though it might not be the same game or setting or genre, but if you're using the same tropes or situations, even though they're flavored differently, it still almost becomes monotonous because you're just doing the same thing over and over. So it does make sense to want to kind of expand your horizons, even though you might not be fully comfortable doing so.
I think a good approach to that, Anthony, because you are so comfortable with certain tropes, certain idioms, certain ideas, take those things that you're comfortable with and manipulate them, morph them, and then that way it's still something familiar, but now it's something new. That crotchety old NPC that has all the answers. Well, now that crotchety old NPC that has all the answers might be crazy. He might be a little off kilter now. And he's giving you all the information, but in between, or something. Give him Tourette syndrome or something. Just improvise those moments because you're good at it. This is what Cypher has us do.
I think that what I've been actually trying to utilize that I haven't fully utilized or utilized to its full potential is the MCG cards, like the NPC deck, the intrusion deck, and maybe not necessarily follow the intrusions verbatim, but utilizing them for new, fresh ideas that I wouldn't, have normally, like usually intrusions, I don't need a card to tell me how to do intrusions. I'll try to do it spontaneous on the spot. But what actually is happening is that they're not spontaneous on the spot. They're just rehashes of other intrusions I've done prior, because you don't think about it in the moment. Like as you saying it, like, oh, this is a cool idea. Oh, I ran this 2 years ago in another adventure. So now I'm actually, especially the NPC deck, not necessarily using the NPC character names and stuff like that, but the personality traits is, the other stuff that are on the card, and going, okay, I'm gonna go with this. And because I haven't done this before, it's fresh and new to me. And ultimately, I think it's the fear of being stale. Even like I said before, maybe not to the players, but to myself. If I'm not pushing that boundary, I'm almost not satisfied. And I think, honestly, all GMs should have that mindset. If you're not pushing that envelope, you're not, going further past your comfort zone, then why, what are you doing in the first place?
You basically said an excellent exercise in working on that, weakness, in that, you don't come up with the characters or whatever, because again, you'll always, or not always, but you'll tend to fall back on the same character traits, the same mannerisms, whatever have you. Utilize, whether it be the NPC deck or some other NPC generator online, where they generate these quirks for you or these mannerisms, and then sticking to it. The important part, again, is sticking to it, because again, when time comes for the game and this NPC comes up, you might feel, actually it's not going to be this way, it's going to be the tropes that I'm more comfortable with, it's actually going to play like this. It comes from, you have to have that not determination, but that not drive, but you have to have the commitment to the bettering of that weakness, and to stick to that, the preset quirks, instead of falling back on what you know.
Yeah, I think that's like really good advice. And the other thing is that you brought up, using other tools. Other tools are going to make you do things differently. It is what it is, no matter how you look at it, and I think I might be a little bit guilty of that myself, because I've got all this MCG stuff around here, the decks and all that, and I don't pull them out a lot, because the thought process is always, well, I'm not at a physical table, I'm not at a table with people, but it works just as well at a virtual table. That deck is going to do the same things, and I think I might take a cue from, a couple of our members on the server, Corsana and Count Zero. Hey guys, they actually set up their game table as if people are going to be sitting down around it when we play Invisible Sun, and it's really cool. And it's actually added an element that I'm like, hey, you know what? That might be something to do. Set your table up like it is, like you actually have everybody around it. You know, maybe use a camera, a secondary camera to show your table. Just a thought.
I also think that I'm going to utilize, which I used to do a lot more than, but I tend, maybe because we do tend to play a lot of Cypher system, more than I'm usually accustomed to. I was always a system jumper. I was always the person that didn't have loyalty to any system. Al will know, I probably introduced him to like 10 different systems. I was always the guy that fell in love with the new and fresh system and started running that for a bit. I'm going to start incorporating some of the narratives from other games and the concepts and theories from other games into the Cypher system to give me a fresh perspective and a fresh way of thinking about the Cypher system outside the box. Maybe pull some mouse guard ideas, some burning wheel, some of those old games that I enjoyed running, cyberpunk, stuff like that. Just not necessarily the rule sets, but some of the narratives and some of the concepts into the Cypher system to give me something fresh. And it also is going to challenge my creative side.
This thing right here, I did not know just how cool it was. It's the Sooth deck from Invisible Sun. So many cool ideas, right from this. Once you kind of get an understanding of what it's all about, I love it, and I will definitely take that idea and start, like you said, but other concepts, other ideas from other games, we'll talk about that in a minute.
But before we go on to the what Dean's alluding to, his next area of improvement, an exercise you might want to try, Anthony, or anyone out there wanting to broaden their horizons when it comes to this sort of stuff, is get a notebook or however you want to write the notes down, and just take up maybe 5-10 minutes, write down the tropes that you're comfortable with, the character types that you're comfortable with. Just write them all down, right? Then take maybe an afternoon or something, watch a bunch of TV shows, read a book, whatever. Then make a section in the notes that say tropes that you don't normally use. It'll be things that weren't a part of the list that you made beforehand. And then as you come across them, hey, I don't use this one, I don't use that one, I don't blah blah blah. And then once you're all done with that exercise, run a game and try to incorporate all those things that you find yourself not normally using. Again, it's a little bit of an extended exercise because you might have to devote an entire afternoon or evening to doing something like this. But in terms of broadening your horizons, it'd be a really, in theory, an excellent way to do that, because you're taking the self-reflection part and you're looking at what you normally think of. And again, in that 10 minutes, the first things that are going to come to mind are the things that you normally fall back on. And then when it comes time for the media intake, you watch your movies, you read your books, whatever, and you make that list. And even though that second list might be things you have done in the past, they're definitely not things you do often enough because they're not part of that first list. And again, it helps increase that repertoire.
I think that's great advice, Al. And just to reiterate the initial thought as well is it's okay to rehash ideas for a newer audience. It's absolute, and all GMs do it. I'm just saying, for my personal growth as a GM, I want to actually push those boundaries a little bit. But if you are doing it, that isn't necessarily a fault. I think that you should be encouraged to, rehash ideas that work because they work for a reason. So don't, just because we're talking about this now, don't think as a GM that that's something you should avoid doing.
And here's the thing I was laughing about when Al was saying that. Anthony, we're back to that vaunted notebook. Yes, get a notebook. Stop writing on napkins. Stop writing on gum wrappers.
Yeah, you know what's funny?
You got a napkin in your
He
pocket,
just
I
whips
know.
on a napkin. Look at my
Dude,
one-shot idea for Friday. You know.
I got 2 ciphers on this napkin.
Exactly. Get a notebook, man.
Seriously.
They're not that expensive. You know, you have a full-time job. I think you can afford a $5 notebook. Guess what? It has lots of paper in it. It's
But
made for ink pens.
I
Stop writing with your kids' crayons.
I think we're good to proceed on this, unless there's any more you want to talk about on this before we proceed, Anthony.
No,
Because it was
I
your
mean,
area.
mine was pretty straightforward.
Okay,
So
so
finally,
I get to end this discussion with mine, and I think it's important that I say it this way. I have to release my biases against other play styles and systems. Because what Anthony was just saying, there's a lot. I have a lot under the hood, a lot of games. Oh man, played so many. And Cypher system has become a sweet spot for me. It's become, my go-to. It's the system that I want to run most of the time. I've bought new games and kickstarted other games and haven't even, really cracked the book. Then I'll read a book and it's a great system, but you know what? I'll never run it. And I have to stop doing that because I think I'm stunting my own growth, because I feel that I've become the caliber of game master that I am because of all the games I've played, all the systems that I've run, the plethora of information that I have swimming around up here, and it's been nice to take a break, but this actual video has kind of awoken that realization that the other systems do make me a better GM, especially in Cypher, because it's easy to adapt things. I'm learning, in the visualizations and everything else. And you know what? Games are always evolving. So I just have to continue to evolve, even if I'm going to run Cypher system more than not.
and
I mean, okay, go ahead. Al,
no, I was just gonna say that that's actually super important, and it's funny that we're talking about this because I've mentioned it offhanded to you two guys, but I've actually been reading a little more role playing games books that aren't Cypher system. I've been reading what is it, Degenesis. I've been reading Rod, Reel, and Fist. I've read a little bit of Mutant Crawl Classics, Shadow of the Demon Lord, so on and so forth. I think those are the major 4 I've been reading recently. But the point is, I'm reading these things and they're so fascinating to me. Like if Synth is watching this, I doubt it, but Synth from the Discord server, I talk to them every now and again. And I'll be like, oh man, I just read Rod, Reel, and Fist, and I have this idea to run it, and blah, 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 blah. And then after that sort of infatuation wanes a little bit, I'm like, okay, the base system for the game, I'm just using Rod, Reel, and Fist as the example here. Base system's all right. I really love the setting. Like, it's awesome to me. And now I bring that back into Cypher system. And it's like, hey, how do I run this sort of how do I get the feeling of this fishing adventure in Cypher system now? Mm-hmm. And because of that, I was able to open my mind, even though I'm still using the base Cypher system rules, I've taken elements and influences from Rod, Reel, and Fist to sort of give it that sort of fishing feeling, because that's what you're looking for. And it was so easy to to say, hey, I'm going to include this because again I'm newer. I'm not fully I don't find something and fully dig into it I know some people do with D&D or whatever have you, that's just their bias. I'm all for trying to read something and if I can incorporate it into what I'm doing, and I find it that Cypher system just makes that so easy to do. And and with Cypher system, it's so easy to let go of these biases is because it lends itself so well to being used for other things.
Adaptation. And it's funny, that you even bring that up. And when we were talking about these questions, what things we had to do. The reason why that question came up, that was actually my first question that came to mind. And the reason why was because a friend of mine, my old buddy that I've gamed with, since high school, sent me a copy of The Art of Wushu. It's another role playing game. It's a very rules light system. It's encompasses a lot. It's really well done. And I'm going, oh man, this is just what I needed to finish off my thought process over here, you know. And we're gonna play. We're gonna pick a day and play and stuff. But it's like, yeah, gotta let go of those biases towards other systems in order to continue to grow.
I think it's fair to say that I think both of you guys agree. I'm probably the most polygamerous out of the three of us. You know,
Well, now
yeah,
at this point,
no, but if you watch any of our older videos, I'm always accusing you guys of being fanboys,
Yes.
oh, I'm
looking at the
definitely a fanboy.
looking at the lens of of there's of a passion for Cypher System. And
Absolutely.
I love Cypher System. You guys know that's my favorite system. But I've always been a big fan of having an open mind when it comes to pretty much life, but role playing games, since that's what we're talking about now. But you know, and I think that there's a fine line of loving something and being very passionate about it, and where it gets to the point where the passion grows so, so the flame burns so hot that you almost blind yourself to every other thing that's around you, right? And then it creates that passion creates addition warring. It creates, this game is the best game. You can't tell me anything negative about this game. I'm not saying that that's you, Dean. I'm just saying that that's what it, that's what it leads to, right? It's okay to love a system and be most comfortable in a system, because Cypher System is that system for me. But the way you avoid those biases is to take the time and just read another game system, play another game system, play a system rules as written that you initially thought you wouldn't like in the first place. Give it a shot. Like, no, I'm not. Once again,
No,
I'm not saying
I was
that
just
you
saying.
would
No, I
I'm just
agree
saying
with you.
for someone, if someone is worried about having a bias, towards other games or other things in general, put your experience those stuff that you don't know about, because sometimes there's a lot of games that I initially, on either first read the back of the cover, be like, hey, this isn't for me, I don't like this. But you never truly can tell until you actually play it once and run it once. And
Well,
that's just a fact.
no. You're. I'm not arguing with you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was just as polyamorous with my gaming as the next person until
Polygamerist.
polyamorous. Polygamorous. My point is, I was just as bad as you were for about 5 years ago, and then I immersed myself into Cypher, and the love affair started. And I was like, I don't need anything else, you know. But just recently, reading Pathfinder 2, actually finally reading the book. It's a great system. I love what they've done. I love the ideas and the action economies and all that kind of stuff. Um, the Art of Wushu that I was just talking about. Um, I actually got a book because I ordered. My dice habit. Sorry, people. I have a dice habit. My dice just came in, but there was a book called The Party Background Generator. Brilliant. So it's little things have been coming in, seeping in, breaking that bad habit I developed over the last few years. Like I said, had a couple of bad experiences with the Adventures League D&D crowd, left a nasty taste in my mouth. And so I have biases, and that's why I said I have to break that and get back to the old me, because I mean, I'm looking at my shelves, and yeah, I've got a bunch of Cypher stuff back there, a lot of Invisible Sun stuff back there, but I've got D&D, I've got Torg, I got Starfinder, I got Pathfinder 2, I got Trinity, I got the New Eternity, I got, you know, it's just so much stuff out there, you know.
And you
If
should
you're gonna,
experience it.
right, that's what I'm saying. If you're gonna be, I'm saying this to those anybody out there who's who does this, who's going through this similar situation with any game, you know,
I mean,
don't don't close your mind.
and just to even put it in this perspective, just because you love one system, or it's your go-to system, and you read another game and you immediately your thought process goes to how can I run this in Cypher system, because we all guilty of it, we all do it, no matter what game setting I read or game book I read, my mind immediately goes, can I do this in Cypher system?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing wrong with acknowledging the benefits and the faults of your favorite system and the benefits of other systems. Me and Al, before we started Cypher Unlimited, the Discord server, we came from another server that was, multi-game server. And one of the like problems with multi-game servers, and like those, like Reddit, where people are discussing multi systems, is that the hardcore fans of each individual system refuse to relent that there is a better system than whatever system is their favorite system. And then it creates like toxicity because the Pathfinder guys are not going to willingly acknowledge there's anything good about D&D. The Cyberpunk guys refuse to acknowledge that Shadowrun has any good elements to it.
Savage Worlds guys don't think anybody does anything. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not the normal gamer. Normal is not the right word. It's not the casual gamers. It's the hardcore, blinders on fanboy fans that create that tension, right? And I'm a fanboy of Cypher System, but I always try to have an open mind when it comes to, other games. Because, even if you want to play it in Cypher System, you still should be able to acknowledge the good things that are coming out from these other systems.
And I will say this before we, wrap up, or, I don't know if you have more to say on this topic. But it's exactly like what Anthony was saying earlier for me. When I found Cypher System, I thought it was amazing. It is amazing. But I was of the mindset like, hey, why would I read, Mutant Crawl Classics? I have Cypher System. Why would I read Shadow of the Demon Lord? I have Cypher. Like, why would I buy any others? It doesn't make sense. Like, I have Cypher System. But, now that, I'm still in love with Cypher System, but that hardcore infatuation has waned. And not waned, I mean, it has waned, obviously, because I still love it, but not to that point, where I'm like blinded to other books. Now, again, I'm reading other systems. And now, and it's the whole point of removing these biases is I'm finding awesome things that I could possibly incorporate into my Cypher System play, or it's giving me ideas on how I could possibly run certain situations or scenarios just based on their settings or their their rule set. It's just awesome to, like, even if you like what Anthony's saying is 100% valid. You should try to play these games, like these other games, like try to sit down and play them by raw. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with reading them and being like, hey, this is so inspiring that I can kind of tweak this and then use it for Cypher System. And that that just comes with the modular nature of Cypher System.
And can I just say one more thing, Al?
Yeah.
Just like everything else in life, right? It's going to make you a better player and GM by having multiple experiences. Like the best chefs in the world aren't the chefs that only cook one nation's cuisine. You know, the best martial artists in the world are the martial artists that study multiple styles of martial art from multiple countries. You know, it's the same concept with role playing games and GMing. You know, you're gonna learn different philosophies from different game books that you can incorporate into your style of GMing. You know, you might pick up something from Shadow of the Demon Lord, you know, that you would have never thought unless you read that book and played it into Cypher System. You know, Fantasy Flight's narrative style of incorporating, you know, dice,
The
like
dice
the
mechanic that actually generates part of the narrative.
yeah, you would have never, you know, unless you experience it, you would never realize how it can help you as a player and as a GM with your improv. Fate, you know, Fiasco. There's a ton of great games out there that'll teach you new techniques as a player and as a GM. And the only way you can learn those techniques is by experiencing them.
And I guess we should move into final thoughts. Because you guys have basically, I think we've all kind of said what we needed to say here.
Yeah.
So, Al, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, just in general, we have specific points of improvement for our GMing, but that might not mean just what we listed here. There are definitely more than enough varying strengths and weaknesses to work on. If you find yourself being perfect at all these things, what are your weaknesses? Find out what they are. Play more games. Figure out what you can improve upon, whether it be your runtime, whatever have you. And if there's something that we didn't mention it down below. Let us know. Like maybe it's something we should be working on as well.
Anthony?
I must admit, I think this conversation was a lot more therapeutic than I thought it was going to be. I think the self-reflection, and the honesty that we displayed in this video was it showed me that I have a lot to work on as a GM, and that it's not, hopeless. That I think that you keep on trying, and it's refreshing to know that we all have the same issues that we have to work on. And I really appreciate this conversation. So I want to say thank you guys. I think this was very enlightening to me. And the last thing I want to say is if you have some of the same issues as us, and we didn't touch on the solutions that you may think we need to address, please tell us, because like what I said in the beginning, I want to improve. So if you guys, anybody listening knows ways that we can improve upon some of these issues we have, thank you. And I'm happy to read it and happy to implement them in my games.
And I'll just say, kind of echoing what my two compadres say, we're all process. We want to be better writers. We want to be better storytellers. We want to be the best game masters we can be. Having things in your toolkit to draw from, is paramount. And don't take anything that we're saying as a negative, because this is all positivity. I know the places that I want to improve in. Other places that I didn't even think about, things that Anthony brought up and Al brought up. I'm learning, and the guy, I want to echo what the guy said. Anything that we may have missed, a topic, an idea, if you need us to focus in on one specific thing, leave it down in the comments below. Hit us up on Discord, Facebook, wherever. We're always around, and the biggest reality is, Cypher, yes, that's the bee's knees of gaming for us right now, but there are a lot of good games out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but I wear my fanboy right on my chest, so so that's all I gotta say, guys.
Um, Thank you so much, guys, for listening to us rant and self-reflect on where we need to improve upon. We're not perfect. We know it, and we can only strive to be better as GMs and as human beings in general. So, if you like this video and you like what we do, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that notification bell because it makes you aware of whenever we post a new video. We try to post at least one video a week, and we're pretty consistent with that. Also, if you like Cypher Unlimited and you want to support us in some ways, we have a little Ko-fi set up. You can give us a little donation to help us cover the little things like Zoom costs. But like we say in every video, our videos and content will always be free. So none of this is mandatory. You could just do it if you want to. If not, we still love you. And last but not least, visit our Cypher Unlimited store. You can get cool merch like me and Dean got on here, right? You can rock the Cypher Unlimited gear and be the belle of the ball at your local party. And also, first and foremost, I totally forgot to mention this, but please join our Cypher Unlimited Discord server. We have close to 3,000 members already, and we have live games being played every day. Yes, I said every day. Plus, there's discussions about every Cypher system, everything Monica Games related to Invisible Sun. No, thank you, Evil. We have it all. Come join us. You could chat with us personally or chat with the thousands of members on our server that are vast wealth of knowledge of gaming
from all over the globe.
Yep.
And Anthony, we have over 3,000 members, not almost 3,000 members.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, we're getting close to 3,300 actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know. You see, I should have had that in my notebook. I had it in a napkin. It was no good to me.
But yeah, again, thank you all for watching. As for the sentiments of the video, keep on learning, keep on bettering yourself. We'll do the same. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.